Well, welcome to our presentation. I do have my video up for a little while. I am archiving this session as I know we have a number of other people who can't join us live today, but that's the beauty of WIMBA, that those who can join us live, and I do thank you for being here today. We have a couple of folks joining us live. We may have some people coming in late, and that's fine as well. So one of the things I do always try to do when I use a WIMBA is I do something called tech check, and I've already done that with the two folks that are in the class. And again, we are archiving this, and this session will be used in this class and in other classes that go on into the next upcoming year. This class will be repeated. It's not always possible to have a live speaker, as you know, and so what this provides is an opportunity for people to listen to an archive session later. And I know you've been used to that, but I always like to introduce that way. And so, first of all, what we're going to talk about today is finding your online teaching voice. And I'm going to give you a few tips for managing your time. And one of the first things I like to do is when I say finding your teaching voice, that can mean a lot of things. We're going to get into that. But I like to sometimes share a bit of humor or some personal pictures. So you can see that's not your presenter, that little pirate there. And it is not Johnny Depp. It's at the Tall Ships Festival, which was a very a fun event. I see we have a couple folks joining us, so we're going to keep going, but I welcome them. Can't Johnny Depp present? I would love Johnny Depp to present. We have a question. So today's session, I'm really going to try to give you some tips to personalize your course and tips to save some time, and I hope I promise it won't go over 30 minutes. And it may go a little bit less. We'll see how we progress. So one of the things that I like to do, first of all, so you know who I am, is I'm a professor in the School of Education. I am a former elementary classroom teacher. I do have my doctorate in educational technology. I've been teaching online for about, I thought of this today, and it's actually quite scary. Well, probably about over 15 years, actually, and it has changed dramatically. The way we teach online now is so different than what I was doing in the late 90s. I'm a tech geek, so this past summer I went out to California. I actually visited Google because that was fun for me. Hi, Kathleen. Nice to see you here. I love to hike. I love going to warm places in the winter. I love Lake Superior, and those are my three children up there. And the picture in the middle, I think, is kind of an interesting picture. That's of me. I'm in a play. I'm actually in a musical called The Mall, which happened last year. So what I thought about this the other day. I'm in shepherd's clothing, a shepherdess dress, but yet I'm reading a book backstage called The World is Open, which is sort of a take on The World is Flat. And I think that might kind of describe me. I've got these. I love history, but yet I love technology. So I thought about this the other day. I thought, wow, that kind of exemplifies a bit of who I am. So I've been, again, teaching in a lot of formats, blended, online, face-to-face. But I'm going to talk a little bit about how we can personalize that online environment. So folks that are in education, and I know we have a couple who have that background, and I do too, and we're involved in training teachers. We often talk about this. We often talk about finding your teaching voice. What does that mean exactly? And people in education often know what that means, and it doesn't often mean, oh, all my students can hear me. It means perhaps about something a bit different. And so I threw up a few words. I thought it means sort of your teaching style, your uniqueness, your personality. And I'm wondering if you have something to share, maybe you could type in a couple of ideas in the chat box about what you think it might mean. It's okay if you don't, but I'm going to just give you a few minutes to think about it, and maybe you can come up with a few words or phrases. And you could also feel free to speak them. And I'm going to actually close my video now. Anybody have any other ideas on what it means to find your teaching voice? Okay, I'm going to move on. Feel free to jump in. Authenticity, great. Yep, that's a great word. It's authentic. It's who you are. It's one of the things that sometimes faculty will say to me who are new to teaching online, or have taught for a long while and are still trying to wrangle with this mode of teaching, is sometimes the class for them sometimes feels a bit dry, or they feel it's a bit robotic. Those are some of the words that those folks use. And it could be that before the technology has improved so dramatically that might be accurate. But I do think, when we think about in-person teaching, which we've all experienced and perhaps are more familiar with, we have eye contact, we can see body language, we have a physical presence that we bring into the classroom. And so for a lot of people, they miss that part when they teach online. But, there are also benefits to online that we don't have in person, and I'm sure you've thought about those things. But the technology right now has improved so dramatically from what online learning used to be that I do think there are ways we can use the technology. For example, the WIMBA we're doing now. You can hear my voice. I can hear your voice. I can see video. You can see my video or pictures. And I think if we remember that online learning, it's not a correspondence course. It's not about the student always working by themselves, only reading a textbook and coming back and sending the instructor something, and that's a friendly, gentle reminder. That's not where we are anymore. I know a lot of you know that. I also think it's a good reminder for myself and others to make sure we remember that. Personalizing any type of teaching takes time to master, but that shouldn't stop us. And I included a little quote. That's actually one way you can personalize your instruction is online, providing some quotes that you find inspirational and meaningful, or trying to make a point. I like to think of online learning and teaching in a living, organic, and changing manner, and I think that's what the instructor and the students all bring to that experience. At St. Scholastica, you most often, at least today moving forward, when you begin to teach online, you most likely will get a class that's already fully developed. And the learning content will mostly be there for you. And so when you first get that class, you might wonder, well, what can I contribute? Because this may have been created with the instructional design team and subject matter experts. And in many ways, that's a good thing, because that's a lot of work to develop that. So it's still equally important, though, that you bring your voice, your teaching voice, to that online environment. So one of the things I'd like you to think about, what have you learned just in these 4 weeks where you feel like perhaps you already have some ideas about this? And some of you I know are experienced online teachers, so maybe you could share verbally or chat in the chat box some things you've learned about from this class, from your own experience, or things you've read about recently, about how you think you might be able to bring a bit more of yourself into the online environment. Maybe I could hear a couple of your ideas. Okay, so Patty, you're thinking about how to more effectively use a rubric. Okay, good.
I think it's been interesting to connect through the technology with people from all over the place. You never know who you're going to run into this way.
Sure. So connecting with the other learners, perhaps, and the other speakers. Patty's talking about the blog, the grading discussions. Yep, Kathleen, you've got sharing more photos of yourself, doing activities that you like. Great. Those are really great ideas, because that's what students will tell us, even anecdotally, how much they really, even adult learners, still really want to know who their teacher is. And so And good, Kathleen, too, like using different colors and fonts, just kind of bringing some other color to that, what can sometimes be a black and white environment. And Joel's talking about that personal and individual feedback, and students love that, just like they would love to have from you in person. And sometimes I think online learning can feel like we don't have that third space. We don't have the hallway space sometimes. We don't have that moment before we start teaching in person where the students are walking in the room and we might greet them. Well, hello, welcome. And sort of that small talk, which can actually help build community. And so what I'd like to share with you today are just some short-term things and then some goals you might have if you really like online teaching, things you could practice. But there are things you could even do if you're going to, some of you might be getting ready to teach very soon and you're already thinking about this. But I think what's important is that you're intentional about it. So you have to have a mindset. You have to go in with a habit of mind that you're going to be intentional of bringing your personal teaching voice to the table, to that online environment. You want to plan and schedule it like you would anything else. And it doesn't have to be very time consuming. I'm not trying to overwhelm you, but I do think you'll feel, you yourself as a faculty member will feel more engaged, and I think your students will enjoy the experience a bit more. So Blackboard offers some tools that are already there for you, and I know that this has been modeled for you. I love using announcements in this way. I might throw in a YouTube video. I might throw in a picture, like Kathleen was talking about. This is a ski trail, I like to cross-country ski. I might show a little cartoon, something I'm thinking about. Wimba, right now we're using Wimba, and clearly you are comfortable using Wimba. Everybody jumped right into this meeting. You've had time to see Wimba. I often use Wimba every week when I open up a new learning activity. I just share a quick 5-minute overview of what we're talking about, and I share that archive. And students have told me that hearing my voice helps them not feel so anxious about what's on their written paper. Sometimes when a student is overwhelmed with text, what we can do verbally helps fill in those gaps that we naturally do in person. And we forget that we're doing that. So what makes sense to us may not make sense to a student. So having that little bit of verbal support can help a student, and it also can personalize your course. So here are some ways I've used announcements and that you could start doing tomorrow. This is from a class I taught last fall. I teach a class called Web Tools for Learning, and it's a graduate level class where people are looking at ways they can use Web 2.0 tools and so on to strengthen their own teaching and learning experiences, and depending on where they're teaching. And I just, in December, throwing a little picture of this that I think is funny, just to say this was right before break. I also, on the right, you'll see that while I have a fully developed content, I often might be reading something in a current events section that I think, gee, my students might really enjoy hearing this or learning about this. And so I will link to it in the announcements. There's no expectation, but it would be very similar to what I would do in a face-to-face class. So that's another way that I use announcements, is to update that. And what it does, and I know you learned about this in the first week, is the importance of instructor presence. Students want to know you're there. They don't want to think that they're the only one in the class. So just by doing these little things, you're increasing instructor presence. And it's also personalizing your course. Sometimes I like to surprise people on Monday for Mondays, so I include very easily into announcement. This is an announcement I did in last December. I went on YouTube, found in the mashup section, the YouTube video. The announcement allows you very easily to bring this kind of content in. And again, very easy to do. So just announcements is one of the ways in which I encourage people in the short term to easily personalize your course. Another thing, again, is to be very intentional with your students. Communicate your strategy to students. What I mean by that, I don't mean you don't need to communicate that you're trying to personalize your course, but communicate how you're going to give feedback to students. Communicate to them about how often you're going to check your email. Communicate frequently, have a strategy, make sure students know that. Be present, use humor, use it a bit carefully. Use your own pictures. Sometimes in my office I'll take a picture of the lake. I often have students who are all across the world, and I'll have them share pictures. So together we're sharing with each other, building community in that way. Tell stories where it's appropriate. Those are stories I often share in face-to-face environments. You should, especially when you're trying to share your experience like you would in any setting, to share the expertise that you bring. Share resources, current events, ideas, etc. So those can go on the discussion board. One thing I like about announcements is I know everybody's going to see it. Sometimes things can get buried in the discussion board. And again, nothing wrong with the discussion board, especially when people are in the middle of a discussion. But sometimes if it's outside or it doesn't seem relevant, that's why I might use announcements. Or I might email students as well. Again, as we talked about WIMBA, using a positive voice, you could podcast. And there's something in Blackboard called VoiceThread, which makes it very easy for students to share their voice. Instead of writing about something, they could actually simply record their response to an idea. Quick and easy to use, and I know you've just been in here for 4 weeks, but it's something you might want to explore. So again, be yourself. Don't be afraid to bring your uniqueness. Have a high touch rather than hands-off philosophy is my belief. Small, personal, meaningful ways, noticing something about a student that you might do in any kind of personal way, or if you were teaching face-to-face. I'm just going to caution you a bit when you're using text and humor. Remember, anything you type can be misinterpreted. I'm sure we've all gotten an email where we weren't quite sure what somebody meant by that. A person can have a perfectly benign intent, and yet we might take it wrong. So I often, if you're not sure about, have another set of eyes look at it. Even a cartoon, we might think it's hilarious, and then we put it out there, and people might not quite sure what we mean by that. So just get another set of eyes sometimes if you're not quite sure. Looking ahead long term, things that you can think about for the future or set goals, or for many of you, you might already have these skills. And some of these are just getting used to the tools and the skills. And I don't want you to feel pressure to do these things, but I'd like you to share what might be possible in the future. So some of the things I use, I have a Twitter account, and I sometimes have students tweet with each other or tweet with me. It helps me. What I feel that Twitter can provide is that hallway conversation outside of the regular classroom. And so again, I'm not saying everybody needs to do this or that but some of you might be excited about the idea of having a Twitter account with your students. And you can create accounts for a class, which I do. My Web Tools class, we have a Web Tools Twitter account, and all the students, we often interact on there. And it's fun because even at night I'll be home working on something, and I can see them tweeting resources to each other and talking to each other on Twitter. You can also in Twitter, I have the red circle here, and this is a Twitter stream that I got yesterday. I was just looking at e-learning, for example, as a topic. I went to Twitter and I searched e-learning. And in Twitter, the hash mark helps you search effectively. And so everything that had to do with e-learning in this Twitter strand started to come up, and I had a number of wonderful resources. So that's an opportunity for you as well. If Twitter's a great place to go if you're looking for things like how do I enhance my online teaching and so on, or any subject. Some other things I do is I keep a blog outside of the classroom, the Blackboard, because I can use it in a variety of classes. So my blog is called Sisu Tech, and I often blog about instructions, and I link to that blog in my class. So last semester we were learning how people could find images that are copyright free. I'm actually, most of the images you see in this presentation are from Flickr, and they're not copyrighted. You have to search effectively to find those. But I use a blog, so that's a Web 2.0 tool. Very easy to use. If you can type on a computer, you can blog. I use something called WordPress, and that's a way too that I'm trying to put more of my personalize my online teaching. I also have a wiki, and I created a Facebook account for my class. Again, I'm not saying you should do all of these things. I'm saying that they are opportunities you might want to try. And if you're not familiar, I might try one, and I might try them after I've taught for a while. And so I'm wondering about teaching online. I know a lot of you have taught online, and I'm wondering if you're willing to share some of the things that you've already worked through in terms of saving time when you teach online. I'm going to switch gears here now and maybe share some tips related to that idea. Anybody have something they've already figured out? A little tip they'd like to share with the group? Feel free to jump in or put something in the chat box as you're thinking about it. But teaching online, some people think, and you probably already know this, that some people think teaching online might take less time, but in fact it can take more time. And I love, Kathleen, that now you can use interactive rubrics. That will save time. That is a wonderful feature. I agree. Because all last fall I had to copy and paste my rubrics and email them to students. I could not agree more. So I'm so happy to see that feature back. Yeah. And great, Patty, you have them respond to the discussion board in a certain time. And that helps you as a teacher, so you haven't extended that window of discussion response from here to eternity, which really would be hard to manage your time online. Teaching on time takes careful thought and attention, and you do need a strategy. And great, and Paula, you have online office hours. That's great too, because you can even archive those office hours, and if somebody has a question, you can repost it. And so for students who couldn't make the live virtual office hours, they might even be able to go in and see what's happening, as long as it's not personal, of course. So I like to use the analogy of weeding a garden, because I have a couple gardens, and I've learned that it's really important that every day I spend a little bit of time in my online class. And my strategy that has worked for me, and I'll just share what I've learned, and this is what I've heard from others. Everybody has their own, and you probably have your own too, and that's fine. So I call it course maintenance, and sometimes I'm teaching more than one course. So when I'm doing that, the first thing I do is I go into every course I'm teaching online, and I quickly check emails, and I deal with any messages or student concerns right away. I do that before I get distracted with the rest of the course. Students that are online, they wait for you to respond to them, as you probably know, and they appreciate a quick response from the teacher. Now, it's real easy and online to be available 24/7. It is easy, and it's also okay for you as a teacher to put some boundaries on that. For me, I might say you won't hear from me on Sundays, or you're not going to hear from me. I will get back to you within 24 hours. If you haven't heard from me within 24 hours, feel free to send me another message. So you can give permission to a student like that, so that they don't feel like they're bothering you. But it's really important to check in. I also quickly look at the discussion board. It's very important that you this is really a classroom management issue. You want to make sure you're looking in there just in case a student might say something that could be hurtful to another student, or if they're way off track. I have seen some things in discussion boards where an instructor, if this was said verbally out loud in a classroom setting, the instructor would have had a comment for that because it could have been hurtful or something to another, or simply wrong. And then even then we have to be careful how we respond to that student. You may have to provide a private email but then respond publicly so the students see that you have dealt with that issue, but you may have to follow up in a private way. So these are the things that I think I call course maintenance. I call that, doing a little weeding every day rather than 5 hours on a Saturday. I quickly go check and deal with messages. I give my discussion board a quick look. And the other thing I do is, and some of you may do this as well, is I provide a common place for students to ask questions. I call it my cyber cafe. And sometimes this is loaded into every class I teach, and still sometimes students will ask me a question. Now, if the question is about an assignment and it's not what I would consider a private question, what I do to model to the student is I will say to the student, I'm going to copy and paste your question and put it in the discussion board, and I'll respond there. And I do that for a lot of reasons. Over time, questions that are safe questions that would not be considered a private question, first of all, students learn through a habit to go to this discussion board. I am not answering 5 questions, because maybe I didn't explain something very well. And student questions often tell you need to spend more time on some explanation, perhaps. And so that is one of the things I've learned that has been very helpful. And what I've also learned is students will often answer the question before I even have to get there. So I don't know if any of you have used this feature. I don't know. I'd love to have maybe you could raise your hand in the chat window if you have something like this, or if you've tried something similar. Okay, so Kathleen, you've done that. Has it been successful for you? Patty has too. Okay. So again, some questions are private. They're not appropriate for that discussion board. So I just have a few slides left. We'll be closing in on our 30 minutes. But it's a time saver. If you're clear with students up front, if you think carefully about how you're going to review discussion board threads, if you let students know when you're going to be available, if you're present, a lot of this in the long run saves time. Fewer students ask questions. They have less anxiety, which causes them not to have to try to ask a lot of questions. They know you're going to be there for them. All of this saves time. I'd like to give you a little hint that I figured out recently with discussion boards. If you have a real active student group, which is actually fabulous, you could open up your discussion board and have hundreds of literally. One day I opened up a discussion thread. There was 150 back and forth. And there's no way as a teacher I can actually respond to each and every one of those discussion topics. And actually I'm glad I don't have to, because the students are interacting in such a thoughtful way. But what I've done recently now is, after a discussion, I provide sort of a summary and a highlight of what I've seen, and add my own thoughts to that, and I then provide those in the announcements. And I keep a little list of the students, and I do try to highlight a student or two each week, depending on how many students I have, so students know that I am really reading their work and that I am carefully thinking about what they're bringing to the classroom. So that's a way that I also save time with discussion boards, grading that as soon as I can, and then summarizing it in a larger way. So then the bigger stuff you have to plan for, as you know.
That strategy worked for me well too.
Did that work for you? Adam, sorry, could you say that again?
Yeah, that summarizing strategy really worked well with me when I was having this combination course.
it does work. Rather than going in, and if you let students know you're going to be reading it and then you're going to be summarizing it, they feel great about that. What they don't want to think is they're not reading it, and they don't know. So, yeah. And so the bigger stuff, make sure you actually block out time for yourself to score and give feedback to students. And I've been a teacher forever, and I still have to remember that I have to block out time for that. That I have to block out time for supporting students. And we just talked about using the discussion board for announcements. So the big thing I can give to you for everything I've talked about today is have a schedule, be intentional, have a strategy, dive in, and then go forward with baby steps. You know, just try one new thing. That's what I do for myself. I love technology, but I still set small goals for myself each semester so I don't feel overwhelmed. So I try to say, okay, this semester I'm going to try this thing, and I'm going to try to get good at this one thing. And that's been very helpful for me personally and that's because I've learned too many things, and I myself feel very overwhelmed, and then I don't feel like I'm doing anything well. And so before we wrap up this session, we are at 30 minutes. Those of you who have to leave, I understand you may have other responsibilities. Feel free to leave. Otherwise, I'm happy to stay here for a few minutes and just talk about what you heard today or anything else you would like to share. So Kathleen has a question, and she asked about personal feedback on papers. I actually do, Kathleen, use track changes, or I now use the comment feature. And I use the comment feature because I don't mind track changes. It's just I notice it kind of screws up the formatting sometimes in a student paper. But here's a trick that I've learned. After I make those comments, either with track changes or with the comment feature, I save it as a PDF file and email it back. Because what I've noticed is sometimes when I send a Word document back to a student, if they don't have the same Word document version that I have for whatever reason, sometimes they don't even see my comments. But if I save it as a PDF file, and really easy to do, any of you can do it. If you have Word, open it up and you can see Save As, and it gives you some form. It'll say Save As Word or Save As PDF and a whole bunch. They always see them with the PDF file. So that's something that I use, and I've learned now to make sure to send that back to the student as a PDF file. Good question. Anybody else want to share have any questions or want to share anything? Yeah, the track changes. Students tell me they do appreciate that personal feedback. And it does, again, it's a great tip. It personalizes you as an instructor, and it personalizes your course. Anybody else want to share anything they might want to try in their next class coming up? Okay. Thank you to you, Patty, and we're happy to have you as a teacher. Yep. I love it too, and it's just teaching is an amazing thing. We're lucky we have the chance to do it. That's for sure. Well, I'm going to stop the archive, and I'm going to go back. I just want to let you know that I'm going to. Here's my email, and I'm always happy to talk to people about teaching and learning. So if you have an idea or you have a question for me, you should feel free to email me at ctakinen. They don't let me use my last N on my name, at Scholastica, and I would love to hear your ideas or hear anything else that you would love to say. So please feel free to email me. I'm going to stop the archive. This has to be used in some other classes, and I don't want to go over too long. It's been really great interacting with you.